Hi, welcome to a new Simply Maya tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to look at the UVing for our cartoon dinosaur here. Now before we start I'm just going to cover a little bit of UV theory and how it works in Maya, and I'll let you into a secret. I really don't like UV mapping in Maya. It's always been a fairly slow process, and I prefer to get on with things like texturing and modeling and dynamics. So I'm just going to flick on some anti-aliasing and I'm going to show you a traditional kind of Maya workflow. Now if you've never done UVs before, the aim of the game is to take something that's 3D and lay it out flat. Now to do this we'll have to cut it into pieces and then cut it again so it can be laid out flat. Unfortunately, the more cuts we make, the more seams we make, the more difficult it becomes to texture. So for an organic model it's better to have fewer seams and a slightly stretched UV map. But let me just show you how we would normally go about UVing this. And as I mentioned, I'm not a big fan of this. I've always used third-party software for UVing, but recently with all the updates to Maya, the UV has got a lot faster and a lot more efficient. So let's do it the old way. I'll then open up Headers UV layout and show you the difference, and then we'll come back to Maya and see if we can get a similar workflow. So let's just take a look at the sphere. Now at the moment, if we check out the UV texture editor, so I'm going to press the space bar to bring up the hotbox and UV editor, you'll see it's got this kind of UV map on it. Now if we go over here and apply a checker to that, you'll notice that it all looks okay until we get to the top where it's a complete mess. Now with a good UV map we want these squares to be perfectly square. They don't have to be the same size as each other, but they do all really need to be perfectly square. So let's look at a traditional UV workflow. Let's come in and first of all create a new UV set for this. So let's come in and go UV, and let's do a planular UV map, and because we're on a sphere I'm going to project that down in the y-axis and I'm going to hit project. So you can see now that my UVs from the top are all nice and square, and from the bottom too. But now we've got a problem with the center section. So here's how we fix that. I'll just turn the squares off for now, and you can see what I've got here in the UV view is the UVs laid out, but they're obviously overlapping each other. So if I come in and select an edge here and then another edge here, so I've got both edges, I can then go to polygons and I want to cut the UV edges, so cut UV edges. If I then select a UV and click Control and right click and go to shell, I'll then select the whole UV shell. With W I can just move it out of the way. So there would be the bottom in this case of the sphere. I'll then go in, select another UV on the top, Control again to shell, and I'll move that out there. So there's the top and the bottom. Now we know the top and the bottom look fine. We can flick on our view again, so that's fine, that's fine. So this middle bit is the one that's really not working out for us. Now I'll select all the faces in this middle component. So you'll see I can select them in this view or in this view. It's just handy to select them in this one. I'll then go up to UV menu again, and this time I'll do a cylindrical map. So there I have my cylindrical map. Now I might need to grab these handles and move them in. There we go, just scale them all the way in, and now I have a cylindrical map for my UV, which is probably a bit too big. So I'm going to uniformly scale that down, and we'll go back to our little squares and we'll see what we've got now. Now obviously this UV stretched all the way across here is not going to work, so let's just pull that in. Whoops. So let me just focus in on it so I can see it. And I haven't selected the whole thing, so I'll go to its shell. Okay, there we go, grab the whole thing, and I'm just going to scale this down till it's the appropriate size and my pieces go square. Okay, so that's about right. It would need to be within this portion of the UV, so let's get that till it's square. There we go, and now I can move these in, resize them a bit till the squares are approximately the same size as each other, and W to move that one over here, grab this one, and I'll scale the same one in with this. Okay, Could have scaled those both together, it probably would have been easier. Now, we've got squares, but we've still got a little bit of stretching down here. So I'm going to select this whole shell. In fact, I'll select the whole lot and go to Polygons, Unfold. Okay, and that gives me nice square squares all the way around, and we are about done, and there it is in the UV view. So let's turn those squares off for a second so we can see it. So as you can see, we've got the middle of the sphere here, we've got the top and the bottom, and the whole object is flat. Now if we turn on texture borders with this button here, you'll see that I've got one seam along here, one seam along there, and I'll have another seam straight through the middle. So that's a very typical UV workflow in Maya. It's how it's been done for quite a while. Now on a sphere this is a little bit annoying. You can't help but think there would be a better way to do this. On an entire character it can get very tedious indeed. So I'm going to open up something called Hedis UV Layout, just show you the workflow of that to show you the difference. Now the first thing we do in something like Hedis is select some symmetry for this. So you can see the top and bottom half have gone different colors to show they're in symmetry. Then I would just cut around here like I did in Maya, and cut around here, which does automatically because we have symmetry. Press the cut there, come along here, and in Hedis we just drop these into the UV view. Then I flatten them, and then I come down to this optimize and just hit run. And this will optimize out my UV map. Just give it a second, you'll see it unfolds nicely. There we go. And that'll do. Now you'll notice that this one and this one are different sizes, but again in Hedis, because we have symmetry, I'll just move my mouse over this one and hit S, and you'll see they both go exactly the same. So now I have all the UVs laid out. In fact, if we go into the 3D view and hit T, you can see I've got nice even squares. In fact, we've probably got a better job out of this in 10 seconds than we did with Maya. So, the reason I made this tutorial was I wanted to do a different workflow in Maya for UVs. So let's take a look at a new way of doing this. So let's leave our UVs where they are for the moment. I'm just going to go into object mode, and I'm going to use part of the Maya bonus tools for this. Now if you don't have them installed, you can go to Autodesk's website and search for bonus tools. You'll find it. It's a free download, comes with a Windows installer, Mac installer. Just go ahead and install those, and you'll find that when you've done that, you've got this extra toolbar entry called bonus tools. Now you may need to restart Maya after the install. In fact, I think the installer asks you to close Maya, so you will need a restart, and then you'll get access to all these other tools. So as I showed you the workflow in Hedis, I'm going to come into the UV texture editor, and I'm just going to turn off the texture borders for a second. So let's just turn off display texture borders. There we go. So as I showed you the workflow in Hedis, let's see if we can get a similar one with Maya. So first things first, let's come in and take our selection tool, and you'll see now under Maya I have symmetry. So let's put on symmetry in Y, and you'll notice if I select an edge here now, the same edge is selected there. So now we have somewhat symmetry. So let's double click and select both these edges. Click here, here and here. So now you can see that same cut pattern that we got out of Hedis. Okay, that's what we're going to use in Maya. So go up to bonus tools, go to UV, and let's have a look at the Auto Unwrap UV tool. So this is new. Unfold 3D is Maya's new Unfold engine. The legacy Unfold wasn't brilliant, so I'm going to leave it on the new one and just hit Enter Tool. Now you'll see here I've got select mesh or face to unwrap. So before I enter the tool, I need to select the mesh, enter tool. I've still got my symmetry on, so obviously this is very simple. I'm now going to go to add borders. That will add the borders, and the warning we got was just about deleting the history on the object, which is fine. And now I'm going to hit continue. Okay, so that seems to have worked. Let's go and have a look in the UV texture editor. And there we go. So I'm going to hit done, and that's done the same thing as we did before with our UV, except it's done it faster and with far fewer steps. So the workflow works very much the same way as Hedis UV layout. I mean, if I project a new UV map on this, so let's just do a planular map in Y, and then let's have a look at the UV for it. Okay, you'll see I've got that UV set here, the same one we've always had. Now let me just dim that background image so we can see it better. You'll see I've got that horrible UV that's not going to work in the center. Well, again, if we just select the mesh enter tool, and I'm going to do this once more so you've got it down pat, one in the middle so we know it, lay it flat, add borders, yes, continue, and let's have a look in the UV now. And there you go, my UVs have once again been laid out. They're all the same size. Let's put the map back on it so we can have a look. You know, and we've got a nice UV layout map, exactly the same as if we'd have done it by hand, by first doing a planular map and then doing a cylindrical map and then, you know, all this stuff. So we've got a workflow that's fairly similar, as I mentioned, to Hedis UV layout, which in my opinion is one of the better UV layout tools on the market. So I'm going to apply this technique to our entire dinosaur. Now the reason you don't see this unwrap tool used more often is that it's a little bit buggy. But I have some workarounds for that should allow us to do a whole dinosaur in one fell swoop. The whole thing should take, you know, a quarter of the time that it normally does. So hopefully we can get these UVs done and out of the way and get started with the texturing. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.